if you've ever driven into the Ghost and you are driving on what's known as the Trans-Alta Road, you're driving into the Ghost, and before you get to the river, you look left, you will see the most massive looking frozen waterfall you've ever seen. This is called the Real Big Drip, and I had seen this climb for years, every single time I drove into the Ghost, because you can't miss it. It's just hanging out on the side of this friggin' cliff, and it's massive, and it's just like these blobs of ice, and they freeze in one part, and they freeze in another part, and it's terrifying looking, and it's crazy. And I drove past it for years before last year. I believe it was 2022 or 2021. I finally got around to climbing it with Stas Bezkin. And yeah, in today's episode, I'm going to tell you guys about how that went and how absolutely bananas of a climb it is. What is up, guys? For those of you new to the channel, my name is Philip Satter. I'm an avid rock climber, ice climber, and backcountry skier here in Canada. I'm also an insurance broker that specializes in insuring those individuals. If that sounds interesting, I'll put a link in the description below. But let's just get into today's episode. The Real Big Drip. This thing is crazy, dude. It is so crazy. It's definitely up there in one of the most bananas climb, I don't know, that I've ever done in my entire life. I definitely want to go back and do it again and lead it, because when I did it, I didn't lead anything. I just followed it. But even following this monster of a climb is terrifying. It's just crazy. So the first time that we went out to go and attempt it, we went out, it was myself, Caro, and Stas, and we came out. And, you go into the Ghost, you go to the bottom of the river. It's in the South Ghost, so you go left, and you kind of just park right in the riverbed. And I don't know if you can see it. I think you can see it from the road, but of course, we show up, it's like friggin', 4 a.m. in the morning or something stupid like that. Just some early time. And anyways, the first time we went to go do it, we walked in, and there's a fork that you're supposed to go left at. We missed the fork, and we ended up doing like this massive, hike. We basically went up this other gully and got lost, and it was like another hour and a half that we realized, oh my God, we're off track. So then we had to down track, come back down, and find the right fork and come up. And, of course, like when you're doing this type of a day with this big of a climb, you can't be wasting time, faffing around, going up, gullies, because eventually you're going to get to something and, you're going to get to it. And you want to have all the daylight, as much daylight as you can to try and get the climb done, obviously. Right. So anyways, we ended up, I think it took us way too long. Like, I think it took us like 4 hours or maybe even 5 hours total to get to this climb, because we went the wrong way and we had to go back. So when we got to the base of it, this thing is like, dude, it's so crazy. Like, it's so crazy. Basically, there's first of all, there's like right off the bat, M8 or like M8 plus climbing to get up to the first pillar, which some years actually forms straight to the ground. And actually, before I talk about that, maybe I'll just like share a little bit of history of this climb with myself and Stas. So Stas actually, a couple years prior to that, had went up, and this was the first pillar was touching down to the ground, and he went up and he soloed the first pillar and got to the second one, and the second one also isn't touching. But I think it was almost touching at that point. He wanted to try and do it as like a double direct. So there's direct RBD, Real Big Drip, which is where the first pillar is touching the ground. And then there's the double direct, which is where both pillars are able to be climbed, which has never been done before. It's never been done before because it's never formed like that. But this is a few years ago when we went out to try and do the double direct first, but then because it was forming like that, but then when we got out there, we had saw that the warm temperatures had caused it to collapse. So we weren't able to do it that time. We went and did something else. And then there was another time that Stas went there and he did climb the first pillar. He got to the second one and he's like, there's no way I'm getting on that second pillar. It's super unstable. like this thing could collapse at any second. And so he ended up bailing from it as well. And there's another crazy story that he has where he was basically there. They were doing a bunch of things. Then they went off to the left, and there's a photographer there and a bunch of other people. And then like the first pillar collapsed and fell to the ground, and they were like just there 5 minutes earlier, and it would have like dropped on their head, and everyone would be dead, which is insane. So this place, like right off the bat, is crazy. It's like it's a wild environment. You're up there on the side of this mountain, and it's like it's intimidating. You look at this thing and you're like, this is way bigger than it looks from the road, which usually you see something from the road and then you get up to it and you can kind of like break it down and you're like, oh, okay, it's a lot smaller and less steep than it looked from the road. No. This thing's the opposite. It's like, it looks steep from the road, and then you get there and you're like, oh my God, this thing is wild. It's one of the few climbs that like it looks hard from the road, and then you get to it and it looks harder when you get there. Most climbs are like, it looks hard from afar, and then again when you get up to it you're like, no, I see the weakness, you go that way, oh okay, I can work my way through it, it's not that bad. This is not one of those ones. So yeah, this thing is crazy. So when we finally got there, the first time, it was myself, Stas, and Carol, and we got up to it, and we did. So Stas went on the first pitch, led the first pitch, and he combined most people, or I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people do this climb in like 5 pitches. So they do the first mix section, which is about 30 meters. And then they do the first ice section, which is about 30 or 35 meters. And then they do the next mix section, which is about, maybe 35-ish meters or so. And then they do the next ice section, which is 30 meters. And then the last section is just a full 70 meters of ice. But Stas is just a savage, dude. This guy just, like, he's a machine. He just goes. And so he combined both, on the first day, so he combined those first 2 pitches. So the mix, the 30 meters of mixed, and then the 35 meters of ice. And so once he was done that, he's basically, at the halfway point, he starts bringing me and Carol up, and like, this thing is insane. Like, I'm dying on this thing. I'm getting takes. I'm hanging off the rope. Like, there's tiny holds for your tools. I'm popping off. I'm like barely hanging on. You have to like pull multiple roofs. It's like constantly it's trying to kick you off. Like the moment your feet leave the ground, this thing is trying to kick you off. It's like, get the fuck off me. It's insane. So anyways, it's a battle, like a total battle for basically, like, I don't know, an hour. Myself and Carol are battling with this mixed pitch. And I'm happy to see that she was struggling as well. It wasn't just me, which made me super happy, because, if you don't want to be the only like weak person. And not saying that Carol's weak, but it made me feel like way better that I wasn't just dying and they were just crushing this climb. That would have kind of sucked. But yeah, so it took us like an hour. It's just like overhanging. You're pulling multiple roofs, and then you pull onto the ice. And it's like, where you pull onto the ice, at least when we did it, is just like, it's crazy, because you basically go from like, there's no good tool placement. There's nothing. And you have to like pull up on nothing and then traverse over to the ice. And your picks are on like 0. There's very little feet. There's very little for your tool. And then you go onto the ice, and it's just bananas. And then when you get onto the ice was bananas too. Like, you're going through these cave systems, dead vertical, like over crazy stuff. And then the end was crazy, because like the way that it finished on the ice, the first ice pitch, the pillar from above had like fallen, and it had sheared part of the ice. And so it was like you were climbing over this ice that was like cut in. It was really crazy. So it took us I think it took us a while. I think it took us like 3 hours or 3.5 hours. Like, it was bad. That first pitch was super bad, and we had gotten lost. So I think at this point it was already like 2:00 in the afternoon. which was like, it wasn't great. Maybe it was even 2:30. And so we got up to him, and, we all knew, everyone knew, and I died. And the mix section, by the way, on the first pitch, that's the easier pitch. The second pitch is the harder pitch for rock. And so we're all kind of like, it's late. Stas knew. He's like, we're not getting up this today. So we ended up wrapping to the ground, which was unfortunate. And then like, I'm just like, kind of like, I wish I was like stronger, like I wish I would have done that better. And I'm kind of like, I'm not strong enough to do this yet. I'm like, I obviously need way more training. And so anyways, I came home, and, as soon as we got to the ground, I was like, no, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do it this year. But I just, I have that kind of like personality where like, when something gets in my head, I have to do it. You know what I mean? It's going to be there. Like if I don't finish a climb, I'm going to be back every day until I finish it. Right. Like it stays with me, and I have to do it. I absolutely have to do it. So as soon as we got back into Cochrane, I looked at Stas, and I was like, we have to go back. And he's like, what? He's like, what are you talking about? You just said that you weren't going to come back for like years and you were going to train. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, we have to go back. Like we have to go back and finish it. Like, I know I said that, but like that was then, Philip. This is now, Philip. Now I'm warm and I'm safe, and I've forgotten how much I was suffering, and we have to go back. We have to go back and finish it. And so I think like right after that, it got like frigidly cold or something like that. So I think like a while, like it wasn't like, it was like maybe like 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks that went by. Maybe it wasn't even that long. Let's say another 2 weeks. And I just like put my head down. I did a bunch of training. I tried to get as strong as possible, as much as you can in a 2-week period. Anyways, and then finally, like the day comes and conditions are going to be good. The weather is like nice that day. It's not super cold, which is like, you don't want to be doing M8 in like -20. Like that's miserable. You need to be a friggin' like rock star climber to be doing M8 in like frigid -20 temperatures. You want like reasonably warm, -5, -10 temperatures. You can wear thin gloves. You can actually crank on your tools. You're not wearing like huge, thick gloves. And you're not getting like, terrible barfies as you're climbing. So we waited for that day, and then it came. And then I texted my buddy Ryan Keane, who's got this like sick off-road rig, because I was worried that, my Jeep wouldn't make it in there, and I wanted it. Like I was hungry for it. So Ryan's like, no problem. So then, okay, so the day starts. So it's like 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever it is. Drive out, drive to Ryan's, grab his Jeep, then go to Cochrane, meet them. So we picked up, Carol was gone. She had went back home. But then we picked up Andy, and he came out to film the whole thing. So he's a videographer, and he was making a film about Stas. And I felt so bad for him because he didn't climb at all. Obviously it took a while to climb. So I felt so bad because he was probably so cold the whole day, just like running around. Luckily it was a warm day, but so now we knew, how to get there. We weren't going to get lost. We went up. And okay, so Stas does the first pitch again, does it all in one pitch. And then like I was dialed in because I knew a lot of the moves. I knew what to look for. I almost did the entire thing clean, but then right at the ice, my tool popped out, and I fell right before the ice transition, which really pissed me off because I wanted to do that perfectly clean, but I didn't, unfortunately. But I got onto the ice, finished that pitch up. And then it's like, now it's like the money pitches. So this was the craziest pitch of ice. And I do have the GoPro footage, but it doesn't do it any justice. Cause I'm obviously so focused on the moment, and I'm not, obviously I'm not trying to like think about, well, how's this going to look in the GoPro, and should I like reposition the frame? Obviously I'm thinking, how the hell do I hang on and not fall? So, dude, yeah, the second pitch, again, so people do usually this in 2 pitches, but Stas just did it in 1. So the second pitch goes like this. You start up the rock and you climb super thin holds. You pull this little bulge, this roof. You go over the roof on thin holds. And then you start to get kind of where the pillar is close to the ice. And sometimes the pillar comes down and you can stem between because you're behind the pillar, right? The pillar will just come down and you're on the rock side of it, but it's like hanging in the air, right? And again, you're at this point like 90 meters off the deck, 100 meters off the deck, and it's like crazy terrain. And this time the pillar wasn't that far down, so you couldn't stem, but it was so cool. So you're on the left side, you go up this thin face with thin holds, and then you get up to kind of where there's like this veriglass of ice and these little tiny pockets, but you're kind of behind the pillar at this point. You see it above you and you're like, oh my God. And now you start to traverse right, and you're traversing right on like thin ice and really little pockets, but like just perfect pockets for like your mono points and your tools, and just like little precision, like da, 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 and you start traversing right. And all the bolts up there are like super old. The hangers are from like the 90s. And you're just looking at them like, oh my God, this thing is terrifying. And then you finally traverse right, and you get to the furthest point. So now the pillar's on your left, but now it's starting to connect to the rock so you can see it. And it's like, you look down and you're like, oh my God, this is bananas. Like right below me, there's like 120, 130 meters below me of this crazy terrain. And so at that point, you like start to then stem between, because you're on the right side of the pillar. So you start to stem between the rock and the ice. And it's like the coolest climbing ever. It's so crazy. Oh my God, it's just bananas. But you're climbing up this thing, and it's like WI6 crazy, steep chandeliered. You're going up this thing, and you get up, and then there's an anchor there, which is where most people belay for that pitch. But then, of course, Stas kept going. So then you get kind of to the top of this, and you've been stemming between, the rock. You've had like some of your feet on the rock and some of your feet on the ice. But then eventually you got to commit to the ice, because then you need to transition back left to gain the front of the ice and then pull over this pillar. And it's fucking crazy. It's so crazy, because you're just like, you're dead vertical. You're on this like crazy pillar, and you're just traversing left over it. And then finally, like, you've been staring at just overhanging rock for like half an hour or an hour, whatever it is. And then finally you like pull over to the left, and you can see like the terrain above you, and you're like, oh my God, what did I just fucking climb? Like, it's crazy. So then, okay, you pull over, you belay on the right, and you're just like that is insane. That like, it's a bananas climb, like super technical, small holds all the way up on the rock, and then the ice is just crazy steep and vertical, and like the environment, you're basically on this pillar, traversing over on it hundreds of meters off the ground, high up on this mountain. It's just like, whoa, this is crazy. So that's that. The last pitch is pretty straightforward. You could keep going for like another 200 meters, I think, if you wanted. Like it just keeps going. Like, so that, there's 70 meters of like WI5, maybe, 4 plus and 5. You just run it out until your rope runs out, basically. And then above that, it's just like, basically, you could keep going, but then it's just WI3 for like hundreds of meters. Like, it just goes for a long time. Most people, I think, just wrap there. That's where we wrapped. So in total, it was 3 pitches of pretty like full length climbing. So like, 300 meters, 714, 21, or is that right? No, 200 plus meters of like hard climbing, though. Like, not like none of those first 2 pitches, there was no moment on it where you're like, this is easy. Every single moment, every single move on the first 2 pitches, 120, 140 meters, whatever it is, was like full on, highly technical, difficult climbing. So yeah, super, super, super cool day. Crazy climb. I'd love to go back, and we'll go back here hopefully, in the next year or two. And I'd like to lead everything myself, because I just followed obviously on that day. But crazy environment. So Andy did make a short little film about that day, and I'll throw it in the description so you can kind of see his point of view, and check it out, and maybe show him some love, give him some comments and some likes. Super nice guy, and he was out there in the cold all day filming us, so that's super appreciated. But anyways, that's the Real Big Drip. If you are on that level of technical climbing and you haven't done it, come to Canada and do this. It's like an epic savage climb, and it comes in every single year. Every single year this thing comes in. So it's not like you have to wait for the perfect year. It comes in 99% of the time. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.